Great.
Thank you very much for showing up today. And for everybody who did not show up, hopefully this will answer a lot of questions when you watch it later. There are a couple things I want to go over tonight. Before I do that, I'm not really good with social skills, so let's pretend that I said something pithy and insightful and thoughtful so that everybody feels their guard let down and that I actually care. So, and now we will go forward. So the things I wanted to talk about today is um, the projects for the class, kind of look at how that will work.
Great.
Then I wanted to go through, just touch on some of the reflections. Most people are doing really well on that. A couple people, there's some issues, just because I don't think it's necessarily they understand what I was writing. And then we'll launch into this week's module. We're going to talk about expressionism and artsy stuff. Right now, I'm going to share my screen here.
Okay.
Kelly, I'm really glad you're here because this is really important. This is the first introduction to my style of teaching and everything and what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I think that this is good because you will ask questions that everybody else is going to want to know anyway.
Great.
Okay, so this is the first research and discovery project module. It's labeled research and discovery projects. And then if you scroll down, you'll see your second research or discovery project. So this one is the first research and discovery project assignment right here, where it's submit your first research and discovery project and discussion. Now, for each of these, I wrote guidelines, and then I talk a little bit about it, what to do. Then we have this page is open for all of the project modules. And this one, when you open that, you get a lot of ideas from people in the class. What I like about this is that the ideas don't always relate directly to our course, but they give good ideas for maybe how you can tweak something that is within the scope of this class. And I want to remind everybody that you only get credit for projects when they are directly related to material that is the scope of this course, which is 20th century art. Art from 1900 to the year 2000, 1999. I'm going to get right here to research and discovery projects guidelines. And I'm just scrolling down this really quick here so you can see some of the things. Let's see. I also have a list of, we'll get to that in just a second. Okay. Everybody is responsible for doing research and discovery projects, 6 of them throughout the course of the semester, and then a final capstone project. And each of these they should average about 4 hours apiece. And you see here, it says 3 to 5 hours of your time. So if you do 2 that are 5-hour ones, do 2 that are 3-hour ones to kind of even that out so that they average 4 hours apiece. And of course, I'm not keeping track with a stopwatch on anything. And these are all guidelines, and I want you to do your best to stay with it. And then the final capstone project represents 10 hours of your time. So, and that sounds like, yeah, if I started the project the night before it was due, this would really suck. But I have 2 weeks in between each of these projects so you can get your idea. And if you're concerned about whether or not it will work, you can ask me about it. But you have 2 weeks to submit your idea and then work on it. These projects I'm doing specifically instead of tests. I hate tests where you have to regurgitate things that you've memorized. And what is interesting to me over the years that I've taught doing these projects, I get a lot of people coming back and saying, I learned more doing the project than I ever have in the classes where I'm the art history classes where I'm taking tests. So yeah, it does sound like it can be a challenge, and for the first one, it will be. There is a lot of rewriting and resubmitting, but I told everybody before, I am more than happy. You know, if you want to get more points, I will regrade your assignment and give you more points every single time you resubmit it. You know, up until the final end of the semester. So they do two different kinds of projects: are research projects and discovery projects. And as you go through, it's important right here. At least two need to be research projects and two need to be discovery projects. The difference is a research project, you're sitting in your chair at home or on your couch or on the ground, whatever, and you can do all the research stuff on your computer and then submit it as a PowerPoint, annotated bibliography, or essay. And I describe what those are a little bit later. For the so this is research projects are exactly what they sound like. They're research projects, and you can pick things like uh, if there's a specific artist that you like Vincent van Gogh. He did a lot of stuff in the 19th century as well as 20th century. But if you are including stuff that he's done in the 20th century in your research project, then that totally fits. Art and artifacts. You could for this you could do, for example, just a report on ready-mades, or if it's a distinctive style like Jugendstil or mid-century modern architecture. You know that's or prairie style. Those are distinctive styles, or a distinctive technique or technology. Uh, for this, maybe art that has to do with cathode ray tubes. For those of you that are younger than 40, cathode ray tube is what the TV used to look like. And that's so the several different things that you can do where you just do the research on it. Discovery project is when you find something of interest to you that is within the scope of the course, and then you work on replicating it. Technique or technology, you recreate an artifact, or you visit a site, and this can be virtual or in real life, that has to do with the subject of your report. Uh, Replicating technique or technology, one student last semester did a series of paintings where she replicated the pop art style of the 60s. And discussing in her discovery project, she discussed why she made the choices she did, and at the end, she referenced all the images that she had used for insight into how she was doing this. Another idea, if it's a technology, this is something where there is an artist that works mostly up north, where his art replicates the 1980s style video games, and that's what he does. So it's the very pixelated art. You could also recreate an artifact. I've had people use the closest materials they could find to the original materials, and then create something. Uh, like for example, the Mississippi River Valley, uh, the cultures there made clay bowls that had animal faces on them. And one of the students just got air drying clay and recreated that. Now that is not in the scope of this class. That culture flourished about 1,000 years ago. But for the scope of this class, recreating an artifact might be, let's say that you really like Lee Bonacue, and you like her sculpture. You're not a sculptor yourself, but you do have lots of clothes in your closet. So you find one of her sculptures that really makes a good photo, and then you replicate that photo with the clothes in your closet laid out in your yard. When you set up your camera on your roof, you look down and it looks like it. Now that sounds kind of ridiculous, but the person who did this with a painting she was able to get clothes from several different people. She separated them into colors, and then she spread the clothes on the ground after she had laid out the outside parameters of the paintings. And even though the whole thing was made with clothing, when she took a photo from the roof, it looked like the painting. Now, if you're not an artist yourself, this really doesn't matter. You do the best that you can. And the reason why I say that these discovery projects is because what it amounts to is you're demonstrating how well you know about this painting by trying to get something that looked like it, even if it's not exact. That does not matter as much as you might think. Another thing that you might consider doing is recipes. Last year, I was teaching ancient art, and one student would go through each of the periods that we talked about, find recipes that were consistent with, for example, Mesoamerican cultures. They found recipes that were from Maya and Aztec cultures and replicated them. And they also went and they found flatbread recipes that were consistent with Greek culture and did that. And in order to link it to the class, they found photos of, or they found images of artwork done by these cultures that showed the food that they were making. Uh, so, for example, when they did desserts of ancient Egypt, they found a tomb painting that actually showed what looked like those desserts that they made, and the recipes that they made were from Egypt, and they were traditional recipes that people said were as close as they could get to what they were finding in archaeological sites. Now, again, if you want to do something like a recipe, making food that's consistent, then for this class, you would do something like finding out what Judy Chicago ate, when she was making her some of her artwork, or what kind of what was Lee Krasner? What was her favorite thing to eat while she was making her paintings? Something like that would be totally consistent. To tie it into the class, you would just talk about the artist, show some of the paintings that they've done, and say this is what she ate. Says that she ate while she was working on her paintings. And then visiting a site housing the subject of your report. There's somebody who has found some really high quality virtual museums, and they're going to be touring those, and then they'll do a PowerPoint showing what that site looks like, how they found it, and what the different portions of the site are, so that you could kind of share in their visit through the museum, of course, while they're talking about this. Now, these are the important points, and then I'll ask for questions. Each project is only valid if you are able to demonstrate that it is directly related to the material of this course, which again is artwork from 1900 to 1999. Out of the 7 projects that we do through the term, and that's 6 of these shorter projects and then one final capstone, 2 must be research and 2 must be discovery. If you want to do 4 discovery and 3 research, or 2 research and 5 discovery, that's totally fine. Or if you want to do it the other way around, that's totally fine. Each of the 6 regular projects must represent 3 to 5 hours of work, while the final capstone project must represent at least 10 hours of work. Again, yes, that sounds like a lot, but you spend 4 hours a week in your class, each class anyway. And you only spend an hour and a half in this class. So doing a little bit on each of 2 different weeks for each of the projects, you can fill up that 3 to 5 hours pretty quickly. After you've completed all the projects, you will need to demonstrate you spent 34 hours altogether. That is an average of 4 hours for each of the 6 regular projects, plus the 10 hours you spent on the final capstone. I put that in because if people don't do anything with this class and then a month before the end they see that, they're going to panic. I don't want you to panic. If you do the projects every 2 weeks, you're going to fill this hours. It's not going to hurt. It's not going to feel like a big deal. But at the end of this term, you are going to have 7 really significant projects you can put in your student portfolio and blow everybody's socks off because you're so amazing. And I want you to read this too. Every project does not need to represent the same expenditure of time. Some are going to be 5 hours, some are going to be 3. I'm just talking about the average of 4 hours for each project. Okay. All right, Kelly, let's see, we've got Kelly, Sarah, and Marnie here. Do any of you three have questions about that stuff that I just... Oh, Sarah, I'm going to try really hard not to look at your background. It's making me motion sick. But if it was an open sky, it wouldn't bother me. But
Sorry.
all those rafters, oh man, it reminds me of every single one of the carnival rides I avoided going on. All right. Do any of the three of you have questions about what I just covered in this first part? Okay. Now I'm going to move on really quick. I'm trying to cover this fairly quickly. I want everybody to read through this. If you have any questions, ask me. Okay, for the research projects, read through this, read through what I have to say, remembering that whatever projects you do must be consistent with the coursework for this semester's or for this course, which is 20th century art. I don't think I need to say it, but I should anyway. You also, all your projects must be done for this class this semester. And the reason why it occurred to me to have to say that is I was teaching this to somebody, and their great idea was, hey, we're going to go to Amsterdam and go tour museums. I thought, excellent, go for it. And so they were trying to report on all the museums that they saw the previous summer. Well, that's not going to do it because it's not representing what they did this semester. So for the research projects, go through and read this. And there are three different ways you can present your finished research project. As a PowerPoint presentation, recorded with your voiceover in video format. I will tell you the easiest way to do this is to prepare your PowerPoint with all the slides and everything, set up a Teams meeting where you're the only attendee, and then record your screen while you do a screen share of your PowerPoint. And then you can talk through it as you change the slides. It must be in the MOV, MP4 or WAV file format. Those are the only three that the system will recognize for this Canvas course that I'm teaching. So that's one, the PowerPoint presentation in video format with your voiceover. So it's not a PowerPoint presentation in a PowerPoint format, it's in a video format. Because that way I can put it up on our class YouTube channel and everybody can enjoy it. Or at least, if everybody doesn't enjoy it, at least they can sit through it. Hopefully they won't be terrible. Okay, the second type is an annotated bibliography that includes 5 sources. And we can talk about what an annotated bibliography is. I describe it right here. And all these things, again, if you don't get all 40 points for a project, I will explain why. You can fix it and resubmit it, and you'll get more points. And then also you can do a cool PDF where you're writing an essay with 8 photos. And I'm going to have to put a word count on this because I've had people just turn in 3 paragraphs with eight photos. So if you three wouldn't mind, I'm sorry, right down here, if you look at this, say the PDF with 8 photos, and I say 5 pages, we're going to have to put a word count on that. And I'm thinking the word count is probably going to have to be about 1,200 words, is what I'm thinking. That is really not very long at all. That is only 4 times longer than your weekly reflection, which is going to be easy to cover 5 pages. And so I think that's what I'll do. I'm going to write down a note to remind myself. And I'll change that so everybody's on the same page. But yeah, I think for a 5-page essay with photos, I'm thinking 1,200 words should not be that big of a deal. What do you guys think? That sound okay? Okay, I'm not even paying attention to Kelly because she likes using 14 words when 3 will do. So Sarah and Marnie, what do you guys think? Okay.
Yeah,
All
I think
right.
that's great.
Not that I don't mind Kelly's writing. I think it's wonderful, but I'm not going to expect the same thing out of everybody else.
Do not give me permission to be wordy. Hold me to a word count.
All right, you'll have to keep it down under 1,500 words. All right, now as we go to the discovery project, read through this description, and then I give you several different options too about what this is. And a 5-minute or less video of what you did. One person was doing something on indigenous people to our area and their pottery, and they actually went to the Virgin River. They harvested clay. They showed how to process it, and they made some air dried or sun dried clay vessels that were similar to what archaeologists have found. So that was really cool. And 1 to 2 page PDF report, or even a PowerPoint video, like we talked about, that includes 5 images of your project, complete with your voiceover. And you can do. I've had people when they do Viking makeup, they do time lapse or anything like that. The Discovery Project, for the research project, I'm a lot more strict on what's acceptable to present the research. Not so much on the Discovery Project, because most of your work is going to be the discovery process. Baking the tea pie with a recipe you found that was consistent with the European Baroque, for example. That kind of a thing. You're spending your time making the project, working on it, going to the museum, going through the museum, and so I just want a little bit of something that demonstrates what you did. And then I also talk about, let's see if we can find it. Let's see, I think it's the next page here. Oh, okay. I just realized that when I migrated this over, it did not include the qualification, the parameters for citations. When you do your work, everybody needs to have MLA format citations. And I do have that. I have 10 free websites you can go to where you just plug in the URL and it shows you what the MLA citation is. Have any of you had a class from me before? Sarah? Okay. Did you get that page? Did I sent that out, right? In that class that you took before?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Because what I'm going to do after we get off the call tonight, I'm going to find that and edit it into this page so that everybody has access to that and can see what those kind of citations look like. Because the citations are really, really important. Okay. Now, does anybody have any questions about what I've just covered? For everybody who's watching this at home, please go through and read that part of the module. And if you have any questions, email me. People are already starting to turn in some of their projects and things. And when we meet next week, I'm going to show images and examples of what people have turned in so people have a better idea. And I know that this first one, please, if you don't get all the points you want, don't stress about that, because I'll say, well, this is what needs to happen so that you get the points that you need. And just fix whatever it is and then turn it back in. I get this a lot with annotated bibliographies because a lot of people haven't done those before, and it's not that big of a deal. Usually the reason people are missing points in the annotated bibliographies is that they don't write as much as they need to. That's one. Another one is they don't use MLA formatting for their citation. And then the most common too is they forget the accessed on date, which is absolutely vital. Why do you think an accessed on date would be vital when you're citing something on the internet? You know, people say that the largest living organism on the planet is a grove of aspen trees. I don't think so. I think the internet is, because it is constantly changing. It's organic, it's fluid. You need to remember to put your accessed on date every time you include a citation because it's going to change. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Richard Hoagland and the Faces on Mars. This guy he even spoke to the UN about these really interesting images that NASA was covering up. And the reason he found that is the first day they were published, the image would look a certain way. 2 days later, they go back and revisit it, and the image would be there, but the interesting bits would all be airbrushed out. And NASA has done this for years. Everybody told him that Richard Hoagland, that he was crazy. He actually was able to go on Internet Archive .net is one of them, and then there's the Wayback Machine is another one, where we'll show you exactly what that website looked like on a specific day and time. And he was able to demonstrate to the federal government that NASA was screwing around with the photos. And of course, faces on Mars, buildings on the moon, stuff like that, totally different discussion. But I like Richard Hoagland because he demonstrated that. So when you do your citation, remember to include the accessed on date so that your future self or anybody interested can find the exact same thing you did. And then the last most common thing is people don't submit the annotated bibliographies or the citations in alphabetical order, which you've got to do. So those are all really super simple fixes. Then you just resubmit it. The system alerts me and I can change your grade for the better. All right. That's all I wanted to talk about that. If anybody is burning to ask me more questions about that, but you don't know exactly how to phrase it because you're just too excited for words right now, email me and we'll talk about it next week.
Can I just clarify one thing on the research and discovery?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's 3 turn-in dates, which means that we're turning in 2 things each time, right?
Well, you're turning in the project, that's the 40 points, and then you're turning in a discussion submission. You don't have to respond to anybody, but this is an online class. Nobody can present in a class forum because we don't have that. So you get 5 points for submitting it into the discussion, and as soon as I see that, you get the points basically. But it's designed specifically so everybody else can see your work.
Got it.
Does that answer you?
Yeah, kind of. If we're doing 6 total plus the capstone, and there's only 3 turn-ins, I think that's where I was getting confused.
Okay, the reason why there's only 3 turn-ins right now is because not everything is published.
Awesome. Okay, great. You've answered everything I need.
Okay, so I'm going to publish them right now. But I think that's really good because I try not to get everything published all at the same time because that freaks people out. But these things people should be aware of. So I've just published all of those. All right, so what you have right now is you see the dates for all 6 of the projects and the final project. So yeah, thank you for that. That would have been bad if I had not remembered to publish that.
Sorry, guys. I feel like the jerk that just got you 3 extra projects.
You're not. It was 4 extra projects. Okay, now the rest of our time together, we are going to talk about the wonderful artsy fartsy stuff for this week. Now, this is from 1888, but this leads me into the second thing I wanted to talk about, which was relevance of the weekly reflections. Instead of doing a quiz on the material, we're doing weekly reflections. And at the end of the term, you'll have 15 of these done. What is really important is that you need to be able to demonstrate that that weekly reflection ties directly to that module's work. So, and remembering that this class is 20th century art. So I've had previous classes where people have found stuff under their bed that they've done artistic critiques on, and had a photo of this doll or this toy that they found. Stuff like that doesn't have any relevance to the actual course. But when you do your weekly reflection, if it is from the module, so that even though this is 1888 and it is not within the scope of this course, because I have an image of it in the module, just say, hey, this is from the first part of the module number 3 for this week, then that validates it. And if you don't say that, and I say, hey, I'm not going to grade this until you tell me, just say, hey, this is resubmit it. At the top, you put it one sentence that says, this is from the first part of this week's module. And then it's totally fine. The reason I have to say that is that some people have done pretty good reflections, but I can't give them a grade on it because I don't see how it's related to this course. But if they say, hey, actually, I saw this for half a second and the second video in the module, then, hey, it counts. There's nothing I can do about it. And you get the points. So remember that was one thing that I really wanted to mention. Now, I do have a video that I want to watch. With you guys that are here with me today, you're going to see this. If this is copyright protected and it's edited out of what's on the course, remember that this video is right here at the bottom of this first section of module 3, or for the module for week number 3. For this first month or so, we are going to talk a lot about the meaning of art, what art is, how to critique it, because it's a lot of people find that they can get emotionally connected with art or feel like they're understanding art better when it's something that they can relate to. And a lot of people, rather than finding how they can relate to what they see, they just dismiss it as being beyond their scope or beyond them. And that simply isn't true. Or they dismiss it as being a waste of time. And that simply isn't true. Demonstration of this is, how many of you guys speak Navajo? Anybody speak Navajo? I grew up with 3 brothers who were all Dene, and they spoke a little bit. I used that in my BFA project when I was graduating from BYU. But if you don't understand it, does that mean it's not a valid language? Or when you overhear it, if you can't read it, does it mean it's a waste of time? Absolutely not. And but if you were to take the time to learn, then suddenly you could understand it. And this is true of whatever language you speak, but it's also true of your profession, what you're an expert in. Whatever you are an expert in, if you're an expert coder, you can talk about coding and different languages that you use for coding. Everybody next to you who doesn't do that has no understanding of what you're talking about. And I've actually seen people overhearing biostatisticians discuss things and then laugh behind their hand because they think they're using all sorts of made up words. And these are women that have IQs of 270 doing their biostatistics discussions. They're not using made up words, but because you don't have the context and the understanding, you can feel left out. I don't want people to feel left out. I want to, that's why I want to share this with you, and we'll talk about what art is. We'll talk about context and stuff like that, because I want you not to feel left out, so you can actually appreciate, even if you don't like the stuff. That's less important than the fact that you appreciate the time that somebody spent to make it. So we're going to go ahead and watch this.
You might think there was a simple answer to this. After all, we know how to say what most things are for, like this or that. and people flock to museums like never before, so they must have their motives. But when it comes to art, people get strangely afraid to ask too directly what it might all be for, because, well, everyone except you might know the answer already. It's perhaps too obvious, it's perhaps too complicated. The result is an awkward silence and a lot of confusion. But maybe it shouldn't be that hard to say what art is for. Maybe we can have a go at ascribing certain rather clear purposes to art. Here's 5 things that art might be able to do for us. It's an obvious but striking fact that the most popular works of art in the world show pretty things. Happy people, flowers in spring, blue skies. This is the top-selling postcard in the world from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. This enthusiasm for prettiness worries serious types a lot. They wonder, have people forgotten what life's really like? But that seems a misplaced worry. We need pretty things close to us, not because we're in danger of forgetting the bad stuff, but because terrible problems weigh so heavily on us that we're in danger of slipping into despair and depression. That's why prettiness matters. It's an emblem of hope, which is an achievement. Prettiness, those flowers and blue skies and kids in meadows, is hope bottled and preserved, waiting for us when we need it. The world often requires us to put on a cheerful facade, but beneath the surface there's a lot of sadness and regret that we can't express from fear of seeming weird or a loser. One thing art can do is reassure us of the normality of pain. It can be sad with and for us. Some of the world's greatest works of art have been loved for their capacity to make the pain that's inside all of us more publicly visible and available. Like putting on a sad piece of music, somber works of art don't have to depress us. Rather, they can give us the welcome feeling that pain is part of the human condition. Art fights the false optimism of commercial society. It's there to remind us with dignity that every good life has extraordinary amounts of confusion, suffering, loneliness, and distress within it, and that therefore we should never aggravate sadness by feeling we must be freakish simply for experiencing it quite a lot. All of us are a little unbalanced in some way. We're too intellectual or too emotional, too masculine or too feminine, too calm or too excitable. The art we love is frequently something we're drawn to because it compensates us for what we lack. It counterbalances us. When we're moved by a work of art, it may be because it contains concentrated doses of qualities we need more of in our lives. Perhaps it's full of the serenity we admire but don't have enough of. Perhaps it's got the tenderness we long for, but that our jobs and relationships are currently lacking. Or perhaps it's suffused with a pain and drama we've had to stifle but want to get in touch with. Sometimes a whole society falls in love with a certain style in art because it's trying to rebalance itself, like France in the late 18th century that wanted David as a corrective to its decadence, or Britain in the 19th century that looked to the pre-Raphaelites to counter the effects of brutal industrialization. The art a country or a person calls beautiful gives you vital clues as to what's missing in them. It's in the power of art to help us be more rounded, more balanced, and more sane. The media is constantly giving us hints about what's glamorous and important. Art also tells us about what's glamorous and important, but fortunately, given that you weren't invited again to the Oscars this year, it usually picks on some very different things. Albrecht Dürer makes grass look glamorous. John Constable draws our attention to the skies. Van Gogh reminds us that oranges are worth paying attention to. Marcel Duchamp challenges us to look again at the seemingly mundane. These artists aren't falsely glamorizing things that are better ignored. They're justly teasing out a value that's been neglected by a world with a deeply distorted and unfair sense of what truly matters. Art returns glamour to its rightful place, highlighting what's genuinely worth appreciating. Nothing seems further from good art than propaganda, the sort encouraging you to fight or what government to support. But one way to think about art is that it is a sort of propaganda, in the sense of a tool that motivates and energizes you for a cause, only it's propaganda on behalf of some of the most important and nicest emotions and attitudes in the world, which it uses its skills to make newly appealing and accessible. It might be propaganda about the simple life, or about the need to broaden one's horizons, or about a more playful, tender approach to life. It's a force that stands up for the best sides of human nature and gives them a platform and an authority in a noisy, distracted world. For too long, art's attracted a little too much reverence and mystique for its own good. In its presence, we're like someone meeting a very famous person. We get stiff and lose our spontaneity. We should relax around it as we already do with music and learn to use it for what it's really meant for, as a constant source of support and encouragement for our better selves.
It's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. The likes of Russell Brand.
So what did you guys think about that?
I think it's missing something. I feel like the I mean I really resonate with a lot of the points, but I also think of art as a way to catalog humanity. It kind of becomes a, for lack of a better word, written record. It reflects, you know, where we were in time, and it helps us evolve in a way.
I think that's a really good point. Maybe that's the sixth thing, you know, for the sequel to this video that they should talk about. But I like those kinds of things, bringing those six things up as to what art does, what art means, and why it's important. One of the things that really frustrates me is all too often people think of museums and artwork as stuff in the background.
Mhm.
And like, I don't know, one of my favorite movie series is the John Wick films.
Mm.
And all of the cool gallery scenes that they have are these amazing gallery spaces, but they're all set up specifically as playgrounds for them to do the filming in.
Mm.
You know, and which works perfectly good for the movie, but there is something about going to a store like Gypsy Emporium, finding Fiesta ware that is just beautifully designed and constructed, and then using that for your cereal bowl, as opposed to a dollar plastic bowl that you can buy from Walmart.
Yeah.
There is something that is specifically engaging about finding really cool artwork to put up on your dorm walls, for example. A friend of mine owns a factory in China where they do stained glass depictions of famous paintings for the Met.
Mm.
And you know, these are little printed glass things about that big or so. But it's kind of fun because just having that on your windowsill in your office with the light coming through brightens up everything.
Mm.
And so art, one of the functions I think that art has is to make life a little bit less trivial, less
Mm.
boring.
Mhm.
So I think, like, my grandpa always felt that art was a waste of time. And a big reason he felt that way is because he just didn't get it.
Mm.
And I don't really think that there necessarily needs to be anything to get. If you don't like it, go back, revisit it, apply the tools of critique, see what you can respect about it. And then if you find something that you respect and respond to, then you may start liking it.
Mm.
But if you open yourself up to the possibility of seeing art, there's a lot of things that you may discover you actually do enjoy, and you weren't giving yourself permission to because you wanted to believe that it was out of your league or beyond your understanding. And that's what I think is so amazing about the application of these four tools of artistic critique, because suddenly it puts this foreign language into a context that we can approach.
I have a so I'm from DC, born and raised. So I was really lucky. I mean, I had, you name it, around me to see artifacts. I mean, all of it. And having lived here in Utah, I feel like a lot of my students really don't know what art is because they never really had a lot of it around them, or at least they weren't. I mean, I was going to the National Gallery like every other day just for fun because that's what kids did when they skipped school. Like, you know what I mean? It feels like I think a lot of times our appreciation for art comes a little bit from our upbringing and what values were taught to us. Does that make sense?
I think there's a lot to that. And I think exposure is a big thing too.
Yeah, exposure
You
is a
know,
better word.
if you're raised in a household where the only art are movie posters and magazines,
Mhm.
what you're seeing is art that's been cut and taken out of context, or you're not appreciating the art that is actually made. Like, oh, I can't remember her name. Jenny Holzer uh, is an artist that is a graphic designer, worked for Glamour magazines, and then she started taking those things and demonstrating that a lot of this stuff we dismiss as garbage art, you know, in
Mhm.
magazines, is actually using all the classical elements of the development of visual imagery. Andy Warhol is another good example. We'll talk about him in about a month and a half. Andy Warhol is known for the Campbell soup can, Marilyn Monroe. What he was doing is he told a reporter, "Well, I do stuff that everybody's already seen because it's easier." When you look at his actual work, he is going back to 14th and 15th century iconography in Europe and using those and the golden ratio to map out very specifically marketing imagery. And instead of using the highbrow oil paint medium, he's using the lowbrow disposable silkscreen medium, and he's doing it all to provide a very different context and way of looking at imagery of consumerism. So the Campbell soup can and Marilyn Monroe are become displayed as medieval icons. Uh, Very specifically, Saint Stephen and Saint Mary, and it's really fascinating to me to see this. Or actually, Marilyn Monroe is more Saint Mary, Mary the Mother of God, and the Campbell soup can is depicted more as a painting of a reliquary, housing an artifact from a saint. And it's just when we realize that that is another level of what's going on, it opens up the world, and it opens up a world of understanding. So I think all those kinds of things that we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes really tie together. And that's the kind of reference point I hope people reflect on as they look at art. I don't expect anybody to memorize all this. Most of you sleep more than 4 hours a night. Most of you have a larger number of social skills than I do. So most of you are going to be living a life instead of reading about this stuff like I do. But these are good things to just touch on and reflect. And if you approach something and it makes you nauseous or you just don't think you get it, take a moment to pause and really look at it through the lens of the tools of artistic critique. And then, if you can, find out what the artist himself or herself or themselves has said about it. A really good example of this is Wassily Kandinsky. Mentioned last week that he really talked about the role of an artist as prophet. And you may think, okay, well, you're talking about painters and things like that. Well, do you remember at the beginning of the term what I said, who an artist is? What is art? Art is any behavior, any activity that you do when you have pulled yourself out of yourself, where you invite something beyond your ego-driven, narrow-minded self to help you. And I shouldn't say narrow-minded. I want to say is narrowly focused. Because all of us are narrowly focused. We look at the minute that's going on now, and that's what we're paying attention to. And when we're doing anything, like grooming a dog, teaching kindergartners, planting potatoes, arranging flowers, it does not matter what it is. When we accept the idea of the flow state, when we approach that, and we invite something outside of our immediate ego-driven self to help us, our higher selves, just an expanded awareness, whatever that is, then that endeavor, that process, and the thing that results from it all become art, regardless of what that is. So who's an artist? It's absolutely everybody that lives and breathes and does something is an artist. And so when I refer to Wassily Kandinsky talking about the artist of profit, all of us are parts of the cultures that we live in. All of us will do things that are reflective of that, and our meditations on that, and our responses to that. And all of us are also doing things where we consider, what will the future be like? And those two roles, the reflective observer and the predictor of the future, those are the two roles that Wassily Kandinsky talks about as, the artist's prophet. So I want you to think, Marnie, what do you do every day? What is your focus in school?
So I just mainly try to get to classes. Like I'm taking 2 art classes right now, and I'm also taking an ASL course, which is pretty fun. And then in my free time, I like to crochet.
Okay, I thank you for that. I'm sorry for just calling you out of the blue, but there's only 2 other people in the class, so tough. No, but I love that, because what you're talking about is you're taking art classes, but you also do crochet. That's an art medium. It's actually a sculptural medium. And you may be thinking, oh, what, I'm just making trivets or gloves or whatever like that. It doesn't matter. Whatever, it's a sculptural medium, and sculpture can be as mundane, and I'm using that with big fat foam finger air quotes, as a building, or as artsy fartsy as something that you get specifically to sit on your piano. But you're also ASL, and ASL is another. It's a very kinetic poetry of communication, and so that's an art form as well. Everything that we do can be an art form, even though habitually we just dismiss it. So I want everybody to keep that kind of in the back of their head, that idea, as we move forward. Now I want to get to another thing. We're going to be visiting this quite a bit. We're going to go back to this, but right now we don't have a lot of time to go over this stuff, so I would like everybody to watch these videos themselves as you go through this week. But this next part of this module is where meaning resides. Now this video right here, it is about 6 minutes long. I think it is an important one, but I don't want to watch it with everybody right now, but definitely watch this. And this is the treachery of meaning. Now, if you let's see, okay, this painting right here. This is one of Magritte, his paintings. He was a psychologist who thought, oh, I'm gonna paint. Maybe I can do something with paint. And he actually stumbled backwards into being one of the most famous surrealist painters that the world has ever seen. But this is a painting. What is this painting of? It looks like a pipe that anybody would use. And underneath he writes, "This is not a pipe." And this is part of and the title of the painting is "The Treachery of Images." Now, looking at this, what do you think that this means?
Do you want me to answer?
Well, I think I would like both of you to touch on this a little bit, but I'm asking this. It sounds like there is a definitive meaning, and there's not. But there's some ideas that this painting directly addresses that I want you to think about and consider. So if both of you could say something about what you think that this is referring to, that would be awesome.
The first time I saw this image, it felt a little bit snobby in a way to me. That was a gut reaction. I didn't know much about the treachery of images, but now I think it's talking about an actual thing or the resemblance or the representation of a thing.
All right, good. Excellent. How about you, Marnie? What do you think about it?
Like when you look at it, you think it's going to be a pipe, but then when it says it's not, it's like maybe it's thing on a message of like, don't always trust your eyes to what you think it is.
I think both of the things that you guys, both of what you said, are excellent. What it comes down to is that this painting forces you to engage with it, and it forces you to have a conversation with it. There are some things that this refers to. One of the things that this artist was really reacting to, and this is about 100 years ago, was just what they felt was the rampant abuse of power that the marketing industries had. You know, putting posters up everywhere, putting ads in people's faces, demonstrating all these kinds of things. This is about the time when um, makeup companies really started promoting the idea that you could not be an attractive human being at all without lathering a bunch of sheep fat on your face. And this is also the time when uh, men were being told that their wives would kick them out of the house and no one would find them attractive. They would not be able to keep down a job if their hair didn't have the right kind of goo in it. You know, and so that's one of the things. You know, he's just like both of you were talking about. Not only is the artist trying to engage you with the image and engage in a discussion about meaning of what art is, but he's also asking you to think about what art is not. It is not a real thing. It's just imagery. It's a simulation of something else. And or it could also be an expression to let you know that somebody else is also thinking about something. And you know, all these things are tied up together. And I think that it's always a good idea to think of multiple layers of meaning, multiple things that something could be, because there's a good chance that all those in some part might be true. Now I have a link here to Talbot's Pencil of Nature. This is another video that I would like people to watch as well. I really like this. I'd be willing to bet that you don't know who Talbot is. Talbot was a mid-19th century photographer, and he was really enamored of the possibilities that photography might have. And this is just an introduction to a book that he wrote called The Pencil of Nature, where he was sending out chapters of the book to people, and then after the course of all the chapters were delivered to you, you'd go to a bookbinder and have them bind it together in a book. But he talks about all these different possibilities of what photography could do and what it could potentially mean. And what is so amazing to me is that this was over 150 years ago that he did this. And he was talking about things like um, portrait photography for families, where families would go into a studio and have their pictures taken together, which was revolutionary. Nobody had even thought that far. He was talking about it as a documentation technique for museums, so they didn't have to put their precious objects out on display for everybody to touch all the time. You know, they could revolve through their collections so that their pieces would not be damaged. But he also even hints at things like tracking electrons and X-ray technology. You know, and doing that a good 2 generations before anybody else had even thought of that. So I think it's really fascinating to see what he has to say about a similar kind of conversation, but in this case, he's talking about the technologies of art. So you know, a similar conversation to what's going on with this painting and the discussion of that, but with technologies. And then we watched this last week, Who Decides What Art Means? And the answer is, it's a conversation. But if you apply those techniques of critique and are able to validate with vocabulary your thinking behind what you believe, then your opinion counts. And then it talks more about this kind of leads into Fauvism, where people are actually engaging in these kinds of discussions by demonstrating how they think and how they think about what they're seeing, but in a visual language that other people can appear into their minds. We touched on that a little bit, but you'll see in oh, that's annoying. I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button and my screen went wonky. But both these tabs, I want you to just go to them and see what you learn about this idea of Fauvism. Do you guys remember what Fauvism means? You know, what that word actually means? Yes, of the beast, and that's what it means. Because when critics saw this, they thought it looked like it was painted by an animal. So, you know, it talks about uncomfortable colors. The colors are not what you would see in nature. And that's perfectly fine because these artists were not trying to express nature. They were trying to express what they saw themselves. And then the last section, we're going to just spend the next half an hour talking about this, is Expressionism. So we talked a little bit about Fauvism last week. Expressionism and Fauvism are the two big art movements that really ushered in the 20th century. And both of them are very important because both of these are what the rest of the 20th century are responding to, essentially. So remember, we looked at Impressionism a little bit. Impressionism has relatively pleasant colors. It looks like it's kind of a fuzzed out depiction of what we might see in real life. And it generally, most Impressionism is going to feel very calming. Remember, the most important or the best-selling imagery on a museum postcard is an Impressionist painting. It's from Monet's series on lily pads, because it's a beautiful scene. It's calming. It's reflective. And then you remember with Fauvism, we talked about last week, it was a reaction to Impressionism, where they were trying to see how far, I think they were trying to see how far they could push an audience. Because you're looking at, you know, this time in the art world, people very much were painting to market. They were making paintings specifically designed to feed their families. And the ones that had developed a big enough name could start experimenting. That's one of the reasons why Impressionism became popular, because people that had already established themselves with realistic imagery experimented with Impressionism, and then that became popular because people gave themselves permission to look at this new thing because somebody who had already established themselves as a real artist was doing it. And Fauvism, these artists were trying to think, well, how can I interact with an audience more, and what kinds of things are they going to accept from me? We see this a little bit today still. We see this with how far do movies push what they present to people? You know, how far do they? How much time do they have to spend on educating us about what's going on in the plot so we can realize how amazing it is? Have you ever watched? People use the term art house because they'd rather do that than use the very short and guttural word that really describes what that film is. But have you ever watched a movie that you just could not get? It made absolutely no sense at all. Or you watch a movie where the director is trying so hard to explain to you the rationale behind their story. It's not worth your time. I've seen movies like that. And then you also get movies like today, we get a lot of really entertaining movies. I still like Marvel films. People are saying they're out of vogue. I still love watching Star Wars type stuff on this Disney Channel. I really love watching Star Trek. But how we interact with it today is very different from when those types of things first came out 50 years ago. At that time, people were the cinema culture was very vested in westerns and slice of life type stuff. An action movie was watching Gene Hackman run after a car and then just throw his hands up in frustration because it it went too fast for him. If you guys ever want to see one of the defining films of the action genre, it's Gene Hackman, Popeye Doyle, and the Paris Connection or the French Connection. And we watch that today and we think, what a waste of time. And a big part of that is because people who want to express themselves on film are constantly trying to educate us as an audience to engage with them in the conversation that they want to have with us through that film. And then we start expecting things as an audience, and directors and actors and artists, other artists in the film genre, try to respond to that and then continue the conversation by expanding their own vocabulary with what the things that we want to expect. I am old enough to remember Star Trek, the original series, before it was digitized and redone. And I remember how excited I was seeing that in the early 70s. Then when I took my kids to see J.J. Abrams' revisioning of the Star Trek universe, those movies today with all the computer special effects and the amazing stuff that they were able to do today were as exciting to my kids as I got excited seeing that original stuff, just because things change. And this is something I want you to keep in mind as we go through these different media that we look at, the different art movements. This is what's going on. You have something that is similar to a thesis, where you have an engaging of ideas in Impressionism. Then you have the antithesis, where somebody are trying to find how far can we push that idea the opposite direction. That's what you get with Fauvism. And I'm just using this as a rough example. And then in between those two extremes, the Impressionism and the Fauvism, you get something that kind of blends both of those together, and that represents the synthesis. And this is where Expressionism comes in. So I want to share with you this. Now, this, I would like you just, everybody, just to watch these videos, and I'll show you what one of these is. It's basically just to introduce you to the imagery that is going on in Expressionism. Now, we do have, let's see. We look at this kind of a thing, and this is very much looking like Impressionism. Would you guys say that this looks very much like Impressionism? What is the thing that pulls this away from being strictly Impressionism? How often have you seen these kinds of blues as blue as that?
Yeah, also the kind of darker outlines, a lot of that like black lining.
Yeah, we can see right with the trees there. They're really out. You have some of these black outlines that start showing up. But it's interesting to me because it has, we have a little bit of that out of focus softness that we saw in Impressionism, but we have this kind of emergence of a new color theory application that we saw in the Fauvism, where it's not realistic, but we can still kind of accept it. And that's what we start seeing as Expressionism is explored. And I do have a really good video where it talks a little bit about this. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, this video, I'm a little disappointed with myself because it's not in this module, and I'll fix that right after we're done. I'll put it in, but okay, here we go. Well, this guy talks a lot about post-war expressionism and things like that. And okay, I'm sorry, I'm not finding the video that I wanted to. So we're just going to go ahead and watch this video here. This is only about a minute and a half, and I think it's totally fine. And this video, for everybody watching at home that's not on this, if you go to this is the third section of this module. Go to Artland Expressionism, tap on that link. You'll come to this page here. That's where we saw Wassily Kandinsky's Expressionism painting. And then you scroll down past that, and then here's a video that introduces you to what Expressionism is.
Does this artwork transmit any emotions to you? Many emotions may come to your mind, such as fear, anxiety, or anguish.
Now, I do apologize for the rather poor AI voiceover narration, but the video itself is pretty decent.
The ability to express emotional experience, rather than physical reality, is in fact one of the main characteristics of expressionist art. An artistic tendency rather than a coherent art movement, Expressionism swept through Europe around the beginning of the 20th century, as a reaction to the anxieties of modern urban life. Using non-naturalistic colors and swirling textured brushstrokes, Expressionism conveyed personal feelings, a profound sense of spirituality, and an inherently modern state of alienation. While French expressionists, such as Van Gogh, Matisse, and Gauguin, represented the world around them not simply as it appeared to them, but from a subjective, human experience. German expressionists associated with groups such as the Bridge, Brücke, and the Blue Rider, Der Blaue Reiter, took inspiration from mysticism, the Middle Ages, and the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. In Austria, on the other hand, Expressionism was a reaction against moral repression and sexual hypocrisy, portraying topics such as death, sexuality, and violence. Even though the horrors of World War I and Nazi censorship officially marked the end of the movement, Expressionism still continues to inspire and live on in later artists and art movements. Learn more about Expressionism at magazine.artland.
Sorry, so that's about a minute and a half, but it kind of gives a little bit of background. And if we go back to the module, what I've done, I want you to watch these two videos. This one shows several different paintings, and you kind of see get kind of an overall view of what's going on. But I want to share this with you too. And as we look through these, this is singular art, expressionists. As we go through this, I want you to look at these artworks and see if you can gather some of the similarities between them. So here's Edvard Munch's The Scream. And here, we have these kind of blurred out backgrounds, blurred out imagery, so it's kind of related to Impressionism. But we also have this really weird use of color that is more related to Fauvism. We get Van Gogh. He's using different techniques to layer down the color so it's not quite in focus. Maybe that's a little bit from the Impressionism. But then we also get these really wild colors that are not entirely naturalistic. And that's kind of embracing the Fauvism. And then what Kelly said about the outlines, you can see a lot of outlines there. Very rarely do you see outlines in nature. The only time I've ever seen outlines in nature is like where between interacting fluids or bacteria. So it doesn't happen very often. There's Edvard Munch again, but here's Francis Bacon. This is quite a bit later. This is about 40 years later, 1953. And this, I really don't like Francis Bacon's work at all. I don't like his theme. It seems to go counter to a lot of reasons for doing art, but it still fits very well into this expressionist kind of movement. The overall theme of this is an expression of some sort of emotion. It's very negative. We do have blurred out imagery, so tying into the Impressionism, and we have this really uncomfortable use of color, which also ties into Fauvism. Victor Schelig, I like his work quite a bit more. He does a lot of these music kind of things, and this is very much out of the 20th century. But if you look at this with that color use and the way that we're not quite focused visually, you see that they're still fitting very much into that early 20th century expressionism kind of flavor, dealing with the same kind of inputs. Wassily Kandinsky is one of my favorite artists of all time, if you haven't been able to tell. What elements about this do you see tied into Fauvism?
Bold colors, simplicity, but also kind of expressing a little bit more than just the thing, kind of expressing the feeling of the thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy to it. So you have Impressionism is kind of fitting in there because of the brushstrokes and things are out of focus. You have the Fauvism kind of influence because of different colors, but it becomes Expressionism because it does feel like it's a fusion. It has those outlines. It's not what you would naturally see on any given day, but it really communicates a lot of what the artist is feeling about this thing. You know, this artist is expressing how they feel, what their mental state is. I think it's going to be really difficult to construct a narrative about that. I doubt anybody will be able to write an essay on everything that Wassily Kandinsky is feeling at the moment that he painted this, but he's communicating an awful lot outside of the limitations of language. How much communication is actual word and language? It's very, very small amount. The countries that I've been to, I've been able to hold conversations with people where at the end we walk away realizing that we hadn't really understood the other person's language, but we knew exactly what they were talking about. I talked to a woman in market in Nuremberg for about 10 minutes about my sister-in-law at the time. She was staying there. We were just having a conversation. And as we were walking away, my sister-in-law said, you know, I could tell you were talking about this and this and this and this, but I didn't know you knew that much German. I said, well, I don't. And the lady didn't speak that much English. But because 80 to 90% of everything is gesture, timing, facial expressions, a lot is being communicated. And in artwork like this, 80 to 90% of what's being communicated is the style of brushstroke. What do those lines mean? Where do our eyes go for focus? What do those colors make us feel? The cool colors, the warm colors, the warmth of this field here, the warmth of this fence in the sunlight, and the shade, the coolness of the shade. A lot is being communicated, even though we can't really express it in words, which I think is beautiful. Kirchner is another one of my favorite expressions. This looks very much like Fauvism, and he is heavily influenced by Fauvism. But there's a lot of other stuff going on. Fauvism seems to me, it feels to me like a way to attract people's attention. It's the brightness of the feathers on a bowerbird or a peacock. It's to get your eye to look somewhere. And then you get something like what Ernst is doing. It feels to me this is even though the colors are uncomfortable, they're not naturalistic. Half the face is missing. There still feels to be this kind of atmosphere of unsatisfied contemplation. So a lot is being communicated. Wolfgang Naumann is another one. Now, Kelly, it is way past 8:30. Okay. So, Marnie, are you seeing, even with Egon Schiele, are you seeing that there is some sort of consistency with different examples of this, even though they don't look at all like each other? Are you able to articulate any of that? I know I'm putting you on the spot. If you don't want to do it, fine. Are you able to articulate what are the things that you are seeing?
Well, this picture on the screen right now, I just kind of feel.
I'm sorry. I just clicked it off.
Well, like with that picture that we just barely saw on the screen, it just kind of made me feel unsettled, like the person was staring into my soul, and I didn't like it.
Well, and that's what Egon is known for, very much so. So you are picking up exactly what he is exploring, because he is Egon Schiele. This is right before World War I. People are adjusting to this new world with new technology, new communication, new all sorts of things. Social structures are being turned completely upside down. And you get people that are saying that all these things are inherent sins of society and society is going to be punished for it, when you find out that these are wealthy people that are doing these things themselves anyway, even though they're making their money off of telling other people that they can't do it. And I don't want to. It's not about attacking wealth, but it is about. He is about inherent hypocrisies, where people are saying uh, communism is good, for example, because then everybody will be on a playing field and everybody will be equal. And these people that are saying everybody will be equal are the ones that insist that they're the one that they need all the mistresses and the cars and the fancy houses. So he is really frustrated by this kind of societal hypocrisy, and that's what he's dealing with. And so when you say, yeah, it makes me feel uncomfortable, that's exactly right. That's exactly what he's communicating. So yeah, Marnie, that's perfect. Now, what I have here is each of these videos is a few minutes long, and they talk about, some of them will talk about the artists themselves, but most of them are designed just to introduce you to the artist's work. And what I want you to do is watch these. Don't have to take notes or anything, but find somebody that you respond to, and when you do your weekly reflection, write it on one of the things that you see in this, and explain why. And as you're doing your weekly reflection, when you do the interpretation part or the evaluation part, talk about why you respond to it. So these are all those artists that we saw in that article right up here, but it just in the Expressionists, but it just is a short film that I shot that I found that just shares some of their work with you, so you get multiple looks at what their work is. And I think that Franz Marc is an expressionist. He might be a photographer as well as being a painter. So different things to think about. So as we are closing today, are there any questions that you have about this stuff? I know we went through it rather quick, but I want you to look at those videos as we go on this semester. The modules will gradually change, rather than just introducing to you, in shotgun blast about a bunch of different artists. We'll talk about specific ones more closely. We'll look at more precise examples of the different art movements, how they relate. We'll talk about the backgrounds and things like that more. This is important right now. It's kind of like dumping out the crayon box at the beginning before you start drawing, because this gives us a lot of the visual imagery that everything else in the 20th century kind of relates to or responds to. And again, I'm saying everything else. We're talking mostly about 20th century European and American art, specifically North American art, because in the art world at the time, this is what a lot of people were responding to. We look at what starts showing up among the African countries and countries around China and other parts of the world. A lot of people were trying to fit into the art market that was being defined by what the artists were doing in Europe and the Americas. So just keep that in mind, and we will talk about other stuff around the world. The sad thing is, a lot of that we see is directly related to how colonialism, both political and well, not both, but political, industrial, and economic colonialism impacted how people felt they could express themselves. Uh, what is really interesting, you get in India towards the end of the 19th century, people were moving from traditional Indian style miniature painting to very European realist art, moving into Impressionism, specifically because that's what they were shown is a real human needs to use for expression. And of course, everybody everywhere needs to be known as a real human. So a lot of the magnificent artists in India in the 19th century turned towards European expression because that's what they felt they needed to do and to express themselves as human beings. And what is nice about that is in the last 50 years, the more traditional Indian arts have been coming back and have been being more and more popular. So you get incredible contemporary artists that are using cloth overlay and miniature painting. But that's when we go take my contemporary art class, we'll talk about that. But that just is a lament that you can throw over your shoulder and ignore because we'll talk about it later. But it is important to understand to at least gain an appreciation for what these artists were doing. And Marnie, I love your take on that because that is exactly what it is. It's all about these artists giving themselves the permission to express emotion and believing that their audience was finally mature enough and not mature. I don't want to say that, but their audience was smart enough to look at visual imagery and share in a conversation with the artist. And the artists were smart enough to realize that their audience was smart. And so it very much became a visual communication between the artist and the viewer. And I love that. And then we move on towards the cubists and stuff like that. And that's where we start getting to artists that demand the viewers be smart and demand that the viewers have a conversation with them. Anyway, any last conversation questions or observations? All right, excellent. Well, guys, be mindful of the project. Think about that. If you have any questions about that, email me, and we will talk about them next week. And hopefully, some people will have turned in their first projects by then, so we can look at them and see what are good examples are. And then please go through. If you got a 0 or anything less than a 25 on any of your weekly reflections, look at what I said and respond to it. Kelly, I'm going to call you out immediately because I made a comment about the access on date. You almost immediately responded with fixing that, and then I came back as soon as I could and changed the points. So it doesn't hurt at all, and I appreciate you seeing that and responding to it right away. So
Google, just to let you know, so in Google Docs you can use their citation tool, and I got lazy and they put the access date before the web link, and I was like, dude, I should have looked at it. So no, great, thank you.
Well, and if I just don't catch the access date, you can also write a note and says, hey, I included that in there, and that's not a big deal. Usually on the MLA citations, the web link, you don't feel like you need to include that at all. And I like having, but whatever you do decide to do, make sure that all the citations are consistent, within the format of the paper, and then it's totally fine. And if I miss it, please don't be upset with me. Just email me and say, hey, it was there all the time. You just weren't paying attention, and that's fine too. And I've had several people have mentioned that to me for the weekly reflections, and I've been able to go back in and correct it. So the other big thing is, if I say that, before I grade this, you have to tell me how it relates to the module for the week. Just if you include that in the resubmission itself, that's great. If I'm not regrading it and you've made the change, email me specifically. Don't add it as a discussion, add it to our discussion in the assignment itself. Email me specifically and say, hey, I made the change, and then I'll go back and fix it. So, and that's, I think that those are the two biggest issues that people have had. And everybody has said, okay, that's fine, made the change, and I've been able to fix it without a problem. So, all right, good. I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful weekend. I look forward to seeing y'all next Tuesday, and where we'll go on to our next exciting weekly module. And I'm sure you guys are going to just be thrilled to pieces. So
Thank you
we'll see
guys for the discussion. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for showing up and being part of it. I'm very grateful.
Yeah. More to come.
All right, we'll see you guys.